Sorry, now I was getting a little, you were getting delayed when you were speaking, so I just took them out. So, okay, you there?
I'm here.
Perfect. Okay, let's get started for the topic. One more time. Again, thank you so much. Okay, here we go. This is Charles Johnson. He is the founder of at 4Kira4Moms here on Instagram and the website 4Kira4Moms. We will talk about how that got started, but one of the things I want to start off from the very beginning is something that happened in 2018. And that was the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act that was signed into law on December 21st of 2018. You were pivotal in getting that signed and getting that passed. First of all, how do you do it? I'm not a I'm not good in politics, and I know it's a lot of work. I'll be honest with you. I went to school to be a lawyer, went to my first government class and bounced. I said, no way. So I took the next route in medicine. So talk to us. Tell us about the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act of 2018.
Absolutely. So before we get into that, first and foremost, Dr. Parker, I just have to say thank you. I want to take a moment and just salute you for utilizing your platform to have these very important, candid conversations about what we do collectively to make our country a better, safer place for mothers and babies. And I know that you have been doing this work and you have been leveraging your voice and your platform and saying some things sometimes that are just uncomfortable, but they need to be said. And so on behalf of myself and the millions of families that have been impacted by what's happened in our country, I thank you. We have to center this conversation in gratitude before we get started. So please throw some hearts and some love in the chat for allowing us. So that is a great question. I'm glad we're starting here. So the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act, much like yourself, you realize how much you retain, how little you retain from high school and middle school, government classes when you actually try and get a law passed, right? So I was very new to this. And after I had started beginning to share Kira's story publicly, what I realized quickly is that I was focused so intently on bringing awareness to the fact that women were having these horrible outcomes. But by raising awareness, all I was really doing was, it was important to raise awareness, but much of what I was doing was just freaking women out, right? And telling them the sky was falling. And so I had to really assess, what is it that I'm doing to affect long-lasting systemic change? And so I began to look around and just see who was out there, doing stuff, particularly on the political landscape. And I came across this bill, HR 1318, the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act. And at the time, in 2017, it was introduced by a freshman congresswoman from Washington State named Jamie Herrera Butler. She was brand new to Congress, and we're dear friends, so she won't mind me saying this. I mean, this woman barely knew where the bathroom was. Out of trouble getting support. And I think at the time when I first found out about this bill, there were 14 co-sponsors on this bill. And for those of you who may be a little bit familiar, that's not a lot. And so I began to, when I looked at it and I saw what it was, and essentially I was kind of give a brief synopsis. This bill would create what are called maternal mortality review committees. And the CDC would provide funding to all 50 states. So essentially what happens is anytime a mother was lost during childbirth or up to a year after childbirth from childbirth-related complications, these maternal mortality review committees would come in and analyze all the factors involved in her subsequent passing. So things like, was this her first child? Was this her fifth child? Was it a cesarean birth? Was it a vaginal delivery? How was she insured? Was she able to get prenatal care? What type of follow-up she had? And then really compile the data in a way that was consistent. And so I was like, wow, this is important. So I began to write letters, make phone calls, having no idea how to get this done. And I really I probably went to DC probably about 15 times, and I had no clue what I was doing. I was just, anybody that would respond to my letters or answer my phone calls and was willing to schedule a meeting with me, I would fly to DC. I would try and stack. I would start my day at usually about 8:30 when these congressional offices opened. I would meet with as many people as I possibly could. So sometimes up to a dozen to 15 meetings in a day.
Wow.
And try and get on a plane to get back and tuck my kids in at night.
Mm-hmm.
Doing this, and I really thought that I was making an impact, but I didn't understand that I needed to be strategic. And I actually, during a trip, it makes me emotional thinking about it. But I sat down with Congressman Lewis and his team, and I'm a native of Georgia, and for those of you all who are familiar know that he is just not only an amazing folks, are just one of the most amazing human beings that I've been fortunate enough to cross paths with. And what they did was they broke down to me the different committees and how I needed to be strategic about who I was targeting, because I was meeting with anybody, not having any, that these people they didn't have any juice. They were just taking the meeting. And I began to target on the committees of jurisdiction and apply pressure. And you got to keep in mind that this is 2017, 2018. So this is right smack in the middle of President Trump's first administration, which was, as many of us know, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, we can all agree this is one of the most polarizing times in our certainly. And so to get bipartisan support on anything, let alone a women's health issue, right? And so with the beginning, we were told that this wasn't a priority, that women's health issue is something that we can really take a look at. And we were just persistent. And they told us that we needed, like I said, we had about 14. They told us that we would need 150 co-sponsors before they took it seriously. I came back with 200. They told us that, and as we began to make progress, they kept on moving the goalpost. And so we began to raise awareness, and with the help of a lot of you all, demand that this bill be taken seriously. And so then they said, well, we've got the support, but we need to get a congressional hearing. So I had the opportunity as testify before Congress in support of this bill. And I'm proud to say that on December 21st of 2018, President Trump signed this bill into law. 2 hours.
Wait a minute, I lost you there. Hold on, I can't.
Sorry.
There you go.
I'm sorry, I had
You're cutting out a little bit.
Can you all hear me? Okay, I'll see. Let's see. Okay, what about, anybody hear me now, maybe?
Yeah, you were saying about 2 hours before
President Trump shut the country down. Because if you all remember about that time, during that time period, that's when he and the Democrats were at odds about the funding for the wall. And so I'm proud to say that was a very important first step for the federal government to recognize that we indeed do have a problem and commit resources to doing something about it. It was an important first step, but it was only a first step. And we're proud to be back. Can everybody hear me? I know. What's up, Alex? My brother Alex checking in. The UK. Can everybody hear me? I know Alex is.
I can hear you now. Yeah. Sounds good. So one of the things about this act that's really important is that you would think, with maternal mortality being what it is, and when people hear the stats or take the time to hear the stats, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, and it's sobering. But a lot of states don't have maternal mortality review committees, and not only that, there's not a whole lot of consistency amongst the states on how to even report a maternal death, how to classify it, how to define it, how to look at all the pre-existing conditions, what happened afterwards, what happened during labor and delivery. So what this act does is it asks for standardization. Because if you have one state doing this and one state doing that, and you try to bring it all together, it's hard. And there's not enough consistency. So this is what this act does, which is crucial. And as you know, I just applied to the Texas MMRC, waiting to hear, hopefully I get it. So if anybody's listening that can help me with that, let me know. But, it's so important to have individuals in these maternal mortality review committees from different areas as well, nursing, midwifery, anybody that's in maternal health, like OBGYN, maternal fetal medicine, to have people representing all different aspects so that each individual death can be reviewed to figure out, could it have been prevented? What do we need to do differently? So that's one of the major things that this act does, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this Can everybody hear me okay? I know it's a little bit delayed on my end, but yes, that is very much what this act does. And just to give you an example of what that boils down to in practicality, it's so important that we have standardization across the board, because as you said, if Texas is doing one thing and Nebraska is doing another, the data is a mess. Not able to learn from it. So I'll give you an example of some of the things that we see. So for instance, Kira passed in California, which is one of the most progressive states, and they've made a lot of progress with what they've done with their maternal mortality review committee and what they've done utilizing a lot of best practices to improve outcomes. However, in the state of California, there's no place on Kira's birth certificate, I'm sorry, her death certificate, that even indicates that she was pregnant. Something that simple, right? And so to be able to standardize this and bring, like we said, this very important cross-section of people from various aspects of the neonatal and perinatal workforce together, and expertise and, you know, statisticians is critically important. So not only is it important to have MMRCs, but diverse representation within the maternal mortality review committees is very important. I do want to say this, that I'm very proud of what's been going on in Texas specifically with their MMRCs, with what they've done, because we know that there have been some horrific outcomes over the past 5 years, but I know that I'm just proud of the commitment that the state of Texas has made. And I'm actually going to be speaking statewide tomorrow to Texas. And so I'm proud of what's going on in Texas. And I'm looking forward to just, you know, really seeing the fruits of the labor in Texas.
Well, they also have them, in the state of Texas, any unit that's taking care of pregnant individuals is getting designated with a maternal level of care. And I'm very proud to say that where I work, we're one of the few in the whole state that's gotten the highest level of designation for maternal levels of care. And it took a lot of work, but we're very committed here, and I'm very, very proud to be a part of that team. But it's important because you have to know which centers are capable of handling certain complications, and where do you need to send a patient if you need to send someone out if they're having a complication. You know, Texas has up to a few hundred miles between where there's not even a maternal and fetal medicine specialist available.
Absolutely.
There's not one. So when to refer, when to send a patient out, all of that is so crucial for people that are having complicated pregnancies, either earlier on or even as they get closer to delivery, or even, you know, right after delivery. And, you know, if we don't have those designations, it's harder to figure out where to go. But now that we have them, it's going to help. It's been a long time coming, for sure. And we have a lot of work to do, but starting with places like where I work here at UTMB, we're setting an example, and hopefully others will follow suit. So we got to start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And the important part is commitment and willingness to start and do the hard things. But we know that they will definitely reap, that families will reap the benefits of those investments.
Exactly. So now that we talked about, you know, I just wanted to talk about this Preventing Maternal Deaths Act because it's very, very important. But I also, you know, why were you so motivated? And that's because of Kira. Yes. Let's talk about Kira. I know I've talked about Kira's story and shared things at 4Kira for Moms on my site. So some people will probably know, but a lot of people may not. So tell us about Kira. What was she like?
Yes. Kira was way out of my league, Doc. She was way out of my league. We're talking about a woman who was just the most amazing person I have ever met. I mean, we're talking about a woman, like I say all the time, who spoke 5 languages fluently. She was a skydiver. She was a pilot. She ran marathons and just really just challenged me to be a better man in every aspect of my life. And, you know, I was lucky enough to convince her that we should spend the rest of our lives together.
Did it take a lot of convincing? I heard somewhere that might have taken a little bit of convincing.
Yeah, it took a little bit of convincing, right? Yeah. A little bit of convincing. And not only that, to start a family with somebody who's an overgrown kid himself, right?
Yeah.
And but I've always wanted to be a dad more than anything. Like I always wanted to be a dad, and so we were just thrilled to welcome our first son, Charles, the 5th. And, you know, when we found out we were welcoming our second son, you know, we always talked about how cool it would be to have boys that were super close in age, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were going to welcome our second son, Langston, and our boys would be 18 months apart. And so, so excited. Yeah, so that is Kira, man. And even it's so funny that even, you know, even now I still get this cheesy smile on my face when I talk about her. Yeah.
Well, I can see why. I went through and watched a lot of the videos about her, and I can definitely see you can't help but smile when you see her face. I mean, she was beautiful. She was beautiful. So let's talk about, and you know, as much as you feel comfortable, but I know you're very outspoken about it, so you talked about it a lot. But what happened? April 12th, 2016, she was going in for a routine, what we call an elective repeat cesarean section. She'd had a primary or a cesarean section with Charles V.
Yes.
Scheduled, I'm assuming.
Yes. So
her normal pregnancy up to that day.
Sure, absolutely. So we, on April 12th of 2016, we walked into Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, California, for what we expected to be the happiest day of our lives, and we walked straight into a nightmare. And it's important. I thank you for setting the ground for the conversation. Throughout Kira's entire pregnancy, she was not only in good health, she was in great health. Other than a little bit of nausea, every single ultrasound, every single prenatal visit pointed to both her and our new baby Langston being both extremely healthy. But as you mentioned, Kira had a cesarean and emergency C-section during the birth of our first son, Charles. And so at our doctor's recommendation, we went in for what was supposed to be a scheduled C-section. We weren't, I know people get the question all the time. They ask about, you know, why didn't we choose the VBAC route? Honestly, it wasn't even an option that was even presented to us. We found a provider that we were comfortable with, that we trusted, and it was his recommendation, and we went with it, right? Having no clue what we were in for. So on April 12th, 2016, we walked into Cedars. The delivery was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we go in, Langston was born perfectly healthy, you know, 10 fingers, 10 toes. And those of y'all who may have had, I know, of course, Doc, I know that you're extremely familiar with them, but which is normal procedure, they took us back to what we call recovery. And as Kira's there resting, and I'm there just soaking in all this pride of becoming a father for the second time, right? Langston is in the little toaster incubator thing. I'm just soaking it up, right? This is it. Everything we had talked about, everything we had hoped for. And our family was complete. And as I'm sitting there watching them, I look down, I begin to see the blood coming. I begin to recognize blood coming from the Foley catheter at Kira's bedside. And so this was right around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I bring it to the attention of the doctors and the nurses at Cedars. They come in, they examine her physically, they ordered some blood work, and also they ordered a CT scan that was supposed to be performed stat. So this is around 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Can I interrupt? What was their reason for wanting the CT scan?
I think it was just to further understand what was going on, because there were very clear signs, but as you know, and you're familiar with the case, is that it really wasn't necessary. And I didn't really understand that until later, right? Yeah. It's very clear signs very, very early on that Kira was bleeding significantly internally. Like, she was sensitive to the touch. Her fundus had not retracted, right? They were doing ultrasounds that were revealing that there was fluid in her abdomen, right? And so then when her blood work came back shortly after that, all of her blood levels were abnormally low. So there were very clear signs early on that we had a situation. I didn't understand that then, but as I look back, I'm so familiar with these instances, and then I've really been able to just, I look every day with these medical records, understanding that. But that time as a father, I share the piece about the CT scan more to understand from my perspective, right? Because in my opinion, they had indicated that the CT scan was something that they were ordering. And so as I was asking, well, hey, where's the CT scan? It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So I was in the impression that was a necessary procedure to assess what was going on at that time in the moment. And so oftentimes talk about that. I think that it is, as we talk about the story, critical to a very critical component of the level of neglect that we experienced.
Yeah.
And so they order the CT scan. Blood work is showing that she's, you know, her condition is deteriorating. All these signs are there. And so, but 5 o'clock comes, there's no CT scan. 6 o'clock comes, she's still there, continuing to deteriorate. She's getting more and more pale. Now by 7 o'clock, she's shivering uncontrollably, right? Because she's losing so much blood. And I'm saying this whole time, like, look, well, what's going on with that CT scan you all ordered? And then they start making mention of, well, we may have to take her back to surgery. And I'm saying, well, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
And no, there's this really just game of denial and delay and misdirection began to just spiral out of control. And so I'm asking, well, look, when do we take back CT scan? They're telling me the CT scan is coming. They're mentioning surgery, but they're not doing any of it. Any of it. And it's important to understand that if you look at Kira's medical records, there's something that, you know, hindsight, that Kira was classified as a surgical emergency at 6:23, at 6 in the afternoon and in the evening. Now it's 7 o'clock. She's still there, suffering, shivering, in immense pain, while I'm begging, I'm pleading for them to take action. 8 o'clock comes, they still haven't done anything. 9 o'clock comes, and I'm still asking, well, look, where's the CT scan? You said it was coming. They're saying that they don't know. They're checking. People are coming in. I'm asking them for help. Would you get somebody? And they're never coming back. There's shift changes, and all the while I'm begging and pleading for them to take action. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It wasn't until after midnight that they finally took Kira back for surgery. After almost 10 hours of being there, suffering needlessly. And as you mentioned, we can kind of go into this a little bit. By the time they took her back to surgery and they finally got her back there and they opened her up, there were 3 liters of blood in her abdomen, and she coded immediately. And when she went into that OR, that was the last time I saw Kira alive. And yeah, that's what took place that evening.
I thank you for sharing that. I think people need, as painful as it is to hear, I'm sure it is painful as it is to say.
Yeah.
Having gone through it, it's going to take this for people to understand it's happening, especially, and I read everything I could read about Kira's story, and I was just thinking, what? Why didn't, what? And I can't imagine as her spouse, as her support person, just feeling that you were being dismissed. And I remember I watched a speech you gave to an audience, and they told you that she was not a priority. Our pregnant women are dying because they're not being made a priority. We have to understand there were so many, just in this case alone, from the very beginning, that it was a priority. And looking back, I want you to know that, you know, you're not in medicine, right? The average person's not in medicine. We're supposed to trust the healthcare providers and assume they're doing the best. And I think the CT scan was just honestly, you don't need it. It was just something to put you to rest for the time being, right? And that's exactly what it was. And she didn't need it. She needed to go to the OR. You knew that probably within 2, maybe 3 hours after surgery. Looking back on this, what do you think was at play here? Do you think, were they slammed? It was too busy? Do you think they thought you were being a problem because you were asking too much? That you were being an angry man or an angry spouse or a hostile? I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just trying to think, what could it have been? Were they dismissive because of medical racism? I mean, let's put it out there. What do you think was going on? If you had to say it, what would you say?
So, as tough as this is, I do my best to educate and inform and share my experience based in fact as a foundation. And what I know and what I've learned, and the way, and let me just start with the perspective that's been shared, is that the way that by somebody that is a very, very, very well-respected obstetrical expert, who's a dear family friend, when they had the opportunity to take a look at Kira's medical records, the way that she described what happened to Kira to us is that what happened to Kira is not a medical tragedy, it is a medical catastrophe.
Yes.
And so there was this very unique combination of system failures as well as failures of compassion and humanity that ultimately led to her demise. In short, everything that possibly could have gone wrong with Kira's care did go wrong. We know about things, people who are on here who know about postpartum hemorrhage protocols and the AIM bundles and all that stuff. We're at Cedars-Sinai, that's a participating hospital. None of that stuff was used,
Yes.
right? When we talk about what ultimately ended up happening, when we got the autopsy report, we understood that Langston's cesarean, I don't know if you even know this part of the story, Dr. Clark, is that we know that in the instance of a healthy woman, baby's not in distress, mother's not in distress, that well, I'll just ask this question. How long should a typical C-section for a mother, ballpark cesarean section, take for a mother that's not in distress, baby's not in distress?
I think my average repeat, for what we call previous times one cesarean, from the time skin to skin, 30 minutes max.
Okay. Buckle up. You want to know how long it was for Kira's cesarean from the delivery of my son? Less than 2 minutes. Less than 2 minutes. And in the process, he lacerated her bladder. But here's the thing. What you understand and what people understand is even with that level of haste and disregard, the lacerated bladder should not have been fatal.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Those things happen. That's why we have procedures and protocols in place to protect women. But then once we knew that she was bleeding, all those procedures went out the window. And it's interesting you say this, is to that point, I find that when I share these things, people are in disbelief, particularly people who are in the field. And when I talk to doctors and medical systems, they're like, and so I literally have to go in with the slides and the timestamps taken directly from Cedars-Sinai's medical records, just so people can understand that this is not some father who's in immense pain, that this is not somebody just drawing conjecture, that these are facts. Yeah. And it's difficult and it's hard to believe as they are facts. And what we have come to know is that, unfortunately, these instances of neglect are happening far too often. Some of them not as extreme, and they don't have to be as extreme as what happened to Kira for them to have catastrophic and all-time fatal consequences. So to answer your question more specifically, I think it was a combination of things. It was complete failure, system failure. It was lack of compassion, and definitely medical racism.
Yes.
I refuse to believe, I'm going to call a spade a spade. That I refuse to believe, I truly believe that if Kira was Caucasian, that she would be here. Yesterday was the first day of school for my boys.
I saw the picture.
Thank you. And so we started first grade and kindergarten yesterday. And it's a tough pill to swallow to think that with all the things that Kira accomplished, with as brilliant as she was, as accomplished as she was, that when her life was at stake, none of that mattered.
Yeah.
And she was seen as a Black woman whose life just wasn't a priority. And it's difficult.
But they actually said that too.
Oh, they literally said that. And that was one thing I over. There was a point around 9 o'clock where I was just desperate, and I pulled a nurse to the side, and I just literally just did only thing I knew, that I just like, man, let me just appeal to this woman's compassion. And I literally held both of her hands and I squeezed them. I said, please, please help us. They've been telling us that they might take her back for surgery. They've been talking about a CT scan. None of it is happening. My wife isn't looking good. I'm concerned. Please, can you help? I just need help.
I'm gonna stop. I don't mean to stop you, but I'm going to. During this time, Kira was probably not saying much.
No.
Right? Not complaining much. It was probably didn't feel well. And I think that's also part. We think that women of color, people of color, there's been studies on it, unless they're screaming in agony and pain, that they're really not. And that could have been overlooked as well. And that's one thing I teach my residents, is that what your perception of how sick you think somebody is doesn't matter. It's, you have to look at the individual. You have to put your hands on the individual. You have to look at the whole entire picture to determine. You don't need them saying, Kira didn't need to say, I'm feeling awful, I feel terrible. She probably got to a point where she couldn't say anything anymore. And sometimes silence is taken out, they're fine. And we can't take it that, especially post-surgical. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I think that is a very, very important point. And I am so glad to know that you communicate that so directly to your students. However, in Kira's case, there were so many red flags.
Yes.
She's sitting there shivering uncontrollably. She didn't have to say she wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
Hell, she is, you know, her blood levels are dropping by around 9 o'clock. They're trying to draw blood and they can't. They're drawing water from her veins because she's been pumped with IV fluid, right? There are so many signs that she is in immense distress. But you're right. You're right that there was a point, and also her character is that of somebody that did not want to complain.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
that happened to a good friend of mine who was in a serious pregnancy issue.
Yeah.
Very similar personality. I actually see a lot of my friend, and when I see, and it made me think about when I see pictures of Kira. And had I not been there to intervene, they would have sent her home. And so I know that it happens. I've seen it happen with the people I love. And you said, there's a quote that you said, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier. There was a failure for the staff to see my wife the same way they would view their daughter, their sister, or their wife. And that's so important. And there's another thing. If I'm listening to, and I'm in academic medicine, I teach residents, fellows, medical students, and I hear, you know, their job is to present the patient to me. And sometimes there's a disconnect there, and they come up with this plan, and bam, there it is. And I'll just look at them and I will say, okay, but if that was your wife or your sister in the bed, would you do the same thing? Or would it change a little bit?
So let me say this. It's interesting. I don't share this part of the story very often, but okay, do we have a glitch? I'm sorry, y'all.
Okay,
everybody
you're back.
Hear me okay? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So after everything happened, after Kira passed, and how he ended up there is a whole another conversation, but interesting time, I'll spare that to you. So finally, after he had been summoned and been given an ultimatum that he needed to come and speak to the family, the doctor who was responsible for Kira's care finally came and was nonchalant about what happened and not willing to take any accountability, and even said that he didn't know what happened. She must have had a heart issue or something. After watching my family become infuriated, I asked him directly, I said, what would you have done differently if this was your wife?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the interesting part, is at that point, he was just puzzled and stunned, because there was this failure to even compute and even have the same, like he was like, what do you mean? That was his response to me, was, what do you mean? I said, what would you differently. This was your wife. And he could.
You know, if you have to even explain that and it doesn't compute, there's a problem there.
Problem.
That's a lack of basic empathy, the basic ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which as medical care professionals, we have to be able to do to provide care for our patients.
Yeah.
So that speaks volumes to me that happened.
Right. Yeah.
So you know, I've been in this situation with my patients before, and meaning that where I've had complications, I've had postpartum hemorrhages. I am lucky in that I work at a university where 91% of my patients are underserved, 85% are women of color. We treat our patients. I love the team I work with. We are dedicated. We do everything we can for every patient equally, meaning and we won't have to go into health equality and equities, you know, topic, but that is something that you have to consider as well. But I do know from what I hear, and I know if my patients have to go somewhere else, I worry a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they're not in my bubble.
Yeah.
But this is happening on labor and delivery units across the nation. And I know because I get transfers from them. So you talk so much, and I can't tell you how appreciative I am, because I know it's painful, and I know sometimes you just want to not have to talk about it or think about it. But what you've done is you've made yourself willing to be able to talk about it because you want to do something about it. How were you able to go through what you went through? Not just you, it's your entire family. It's everybody that loved Kira. It's her babies. It wasn't, and I'm not taking anything away from you, but it was everybody that lost her.
I appreciate that.
It was. And how were you able to take what happened and do something about it? Because you have done something about it, and I'm not saying everybody has to. This isn't for everyone. It's
Right.
not. And it doesn't have to be for everyone. But there's certain individuals like yourself that are able to do that. How were you able to do that?
You know, I just felt like I had to do something, right? Because first, when this first happened, and I've been very transparent, like I really thought that it was a fluke. I thought what happened to Kira was just this complete catastrophe. But this doesn't happen in 2016 to healthy women who have access to care, that do everything right, that have everything going for them at hospitals like Cedars-Sinai. I'm thinking like it's just a freak occurrence.
So I was going to ask you during all this, when you started, because you probably didn't go into knowing all the stats and realizing this was an issue until it happened. You're like, what?
Literally, and I have to be always transparent about the fact that when we walked into Cedars-Sinai on April 12th of 2016, the possibility that Kira would not walk out to raise her sons, it never crossed my mind, right? Like this is a walk in the park for us. Mm-hmm. It's a scheduled C-section. Like we're going to go, like, this is something on the calendar, and we're going to get on to building this amazing life together. But as the days turned into weeks, people started sharing their stories. And I say all the time, at first I was thinking that, you know what, these stories are flowing in my direction because this is people's way of trying to support me.
Yes.
And connect with me in my grief. But the more I'm hearing these stories, that's when I'm thinking, wait a minute, something's going on. And that's when I did the research for myself, and I was blown away. And I was shocked by two things. One, that this was happening. And so I know that a lot of people here are familiar with this, but let's just kind of give some baseline facts. Yeah. One, that right now in the United States, we lead the industrialized world in women dying from childbirth. That was the first thing that was shocking to me. And then, of course, that African-American women are dying up to 5 times as often as their Caucasian counterparts. Mind-blowing. But more than that, it was mind-blowing that it seemed like nobody was, how is this America's dirty little secret? How is this happening? And people aren't talking about it. And so that's my like, I got to do something. I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know how I could make a difference, but I felt like I owed it to Kira. I felt like I owed it to my boys to try and do something. And that's when I just began to share her story. And just to be honest with you, I had no clue what to expect. I didn't even have a particular goal. I just felt that I had to, by sharing Kira's story, my only hope was that it would bring attention to this and hopefully people would take notice and maybe begin to ask questions. But I had no idea what my life would turn into.
Yeah.
And so for me to answer your question with specificity about how I do it, it's never easy. Every single time I share this story, I am right back there in that room. I can see everything. I hear the sounds. I smell the smells, every single time. But my hope is that by sharing Kira's story and by what I call applying pressure and being relentless about this, that it will stop another father from having to have the conversation with his babies and explain to them that mommy's never coming home. So every day I dust myself off, and anybody that's willing to listen, I'm going to share the story, and I'm going to keep on just doing everything I can as long as there's breath in my body to make sure that that we fix this. Because the good news is this, and I know that this is tough, and I know that these statistics are depressing, they're infuriating, there's so many things, but the good news is that we can fix this.
Yes.
We can fix it, right? We can fix this in our generation. This can be something that by the time my children, and I know you have 2 little ones, by the time they're ready to give birth, they can talk about this in the historical context. And that's really my goal, right? Is that we take ownership of this, we make the necessary investments, and we come together and we put petty things, we put what our views on birthing are, we put our politics aside, and make the necessary investments to protect mothers and babies. And I think that when we talk about politics, when we talk about stakeholders, this is that transcends everything in our country at a time so much divides us. This is something uniquely bipartisan. This is something that affects all families. And so I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do, but we still have so much work to do.
But along the same lines, you know, I trained a gazillion years, 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 4 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship. I don't remember one class about health disparities in medicine. Or I'm an OB-GYN. I had 7 years of training, 4 years of OB, 3 years of fellowship about maternal mortality.
Yeah.
And the disparities that exist within maternal mortality. And again, I've been at the same institution since 2004, and like, you know, I gave the stats about my patient population, so I am in a certain environment to where, you know, like I said, I'm very blessed that we're able to do, and we do provide the care that we provide. But I started hearing all the stories too, and not that I didn't know, but I wasn't faced with it every day because we are very good at what we do. But hearing all the other stories, I started years ago reading up on it myself. I started having these conversations anytime I had a group of medical students in front of me, a group of residents, because they're not getting enough of it. And for any healthcare provider that takes care of pregnant individuals, postpartum individuals, you're going to have to seek that out. You're going to educate yourself. And until we do that, you can have compliance training at your institution that makes you read, you know, check off the boxes and do the questions about health disparities so that you can, you know, get your, you know, for the next year at your hospital. But until you actually put it into practice and make it a part of you as a healthcare provider, it's not going to change. We have to do that. And you know, again, I don't want to make it sound like it's it's not doable. I think it is doable because we read on everything else, right? We'll read about cardiomyopathy. Why can't we read about this? There's a lot of good literature on it. And again, like I said, you can have to do whatever compliance training you need to do for your institution, but until you actually make it a part of your everyday care as a physician or nurse or anybody else in the healthcare profession, that this is how you're going to change how you look at, you know, these things, and you're going to be aware of that. You're going to address it if you see certain acts of implicit bias or overt racism in medicine, and you bring the alarm, sound the alarm for it. we all have to be willing to do that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's how I kind of put this in perspective, right? The thing about implicit biases is implicit bias.
Yeah.
And overcoming those biases and our hangups takes real internal work.
It does. Mm-hmm.
It takes us coming face to face with things about us that may be by ourselves or by other people viewed as ugly.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the reality of the situation, is that if you are a care provider or somebody who is in a public service role where you are responsible for the lives and safety of other people,
mm-hmm.
if you're a civilian and you have issues and isms, you have the luxury of working those issues and isms out in your own time at your leisure. And if not, you deal with that, you know, when you make it to the pearly gates or whatever you do, however, whenever you choose to. However, if you are a care provider, if you are a police officer, if you are a judge, if you are a nurse, if you are a midwife, your isms and your biases can have catastrophic and oftentimes fatal consequences if we bring them into the work. And so what I tell people very directly in no uncertain terms is that you have two choices. Because the reality situation is, let me be clear too, is that it's not just Caucasian folks that have biases. We all have them.
Yes, exactly.
And the thing about bias is that they are measurable and they are quantifiable. And so if you are in these roles, you have two choices. Either you take steps to understand them and improve them, or you need to find something else to do.
Exactly. Uh-huh.
That's it.
Right.
That's it. It's that serious, because at the end of the day, I refuse to continue to sit up here and have these conversations at 3 a.m. with grown men who are crying their eyes out because they don't know what to tell their kids. Because somebody failed to view their wife in the same way that they would their own loved one, their own sister, their own mother, their own daughter, right? If you don't have the compassion and the capacity to open your heart and see your patients and the people that are trusting you with their lives, and by proxy the lives of everybody that cares about them, then you need to find something else to do. Period. And it's not enough to check the box.
And and it doesn't matter how many years of training you have, how many degrees, how many accolades, how many honors. None of us are above that. And we have to check ourselves. We have to do, like you said, some internal reflection, see if there's things we can do to improve ourselves. And sometimes we have to, just like I did, you research and study it. So I checked myself years seeing if I could do things better, but I wanted to do things better because there is a problem. So all of us, especially those who are taking or in obstetrical care, we have to be willing to do that. Nobody is above it. Just because you're a smart person, because you're in healthcare or a physician, you're not above it. Until we are willing to accept that and realize it and do something about it, these stats are not going to change.
Intelligence and compassion are two very different things.
Exactly.
And so, Dr. Clark, if it's okay with you, we're going to do a little something different. If it's okay, we're going to continue to talk on the fly because I got to go. I got to be in the carpool line. So I'm going to roll.
Yeah, no. Yes, no.
I can stay on though.
You say okay. So listen, but I want it because I'm going to get shut off in 9 minutes.
Okay.
I wanted to let's talk about the Maternal Momnibus Act, okay?
Yes, let's do it.
Because I'm going to set it up. HR 959, the Maternal Momnibus Act. I'm going to set some stuff in my stories where you guys can get some information. Basically, it's a comprehensive package of 12 different bills that will address all the very different aspects of the maternal mortality issue. I won't go through all 12. But each of the 12 titles was introduced as a standalone bill by a member of the Black Maternal Health Caucus. I will also link that. The one that the Kira Johnson Act, I think is from number 2, right? Provide funding to community-based organizations that are working to improve maternal health outcomes and promote equity, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So tell me more about the Kira Johnson Act.
Yeah, so I am extremely proud of the Kira Johnson Act. It is going to take important steps to provide funding to community-based organizations that are in the community, on the front lines, doing the work. It is going to take important steps towards creating what we're calling, like we said, basically compassionate and comprehensive care compliance offices, which are going to be that are going to be independent from hospitals, but within hospitals and inside
They have to
hospitals.
be
So
independent. That's the key.
that's the part, right? So they're going to be independent. They are going to. So for instance, how this works: if you're in a situation, you're in a hospital, and you feel discriminated against, you feel that you were a victim of negligence, bias, and that you really feel that you did not receive optimal care. You have an opportunity. If you want to voice your opinion, you're going to go to quality control, and basically somebody that works for that office, and their job really is looking out for the interests of that hospital, of that institution. The difference is we're going to have compliance offices inside of these hospitals that are independent from the hospitals. But watch this. The federal government is going to collect and publish that data, right? So this is going to go a long way towards transparency and accountability for providers. And let me say this, I truly believe that the majority of providers that do this work, that have committed their lives, are amazing people, right? However, just like policing, just like any of these other things, we have to hold the ones that are bad actors accountable, right? And that starts with not only these mechanisms, but it starts with people like yourself that are willing to practice, allyship in a way that is giving voice to things and calling for better accountability and making sure that people are stepping up to the plate, and that people that are doing the same old things and have beliefs and practices that are rooted in outdated stuff, they gotta go. They gotta go. Look, the post office is hiring. Chipotle is hiring. Right? There's a lot of places hiring. Uber, Uber's always good, but you can't be taking care of our mamas. You can't.
Exactly.
You got to find something to do. Seriously. Seriously.
So I agree. I can't say I'm not going to say anything else because I can't say any better than that. It's exactly right. And I've said that and I mean it too. And I'm in this profession. If you can't provide everybody equal and equitable care without putting, everybody in an ism, as you said, you got to find another line of work.
You got to find another line of work.
The maternal mortality issue in this country is a huge issue. There's huge racial and ethnic disparities.
Yeah.
You touched on some of them, and we're going to continue to lose moms, sisters, wives until something's done.
Absolutely.
How can people support the Kira Johnson Act and the Black Maternal Momnibus Act?
Excellent question, Dr. Clark. So first and foremost, what you can do is you can go to forkira4moms.com, or if you want to make this easy, a shortcut, if you go to the link in our bio, just click on the link that says sign the petition. In 30 seconds, everybody, all you have to do is enter your zip code and your first and last name, and automatically our website is going to send a letter to both of your U.S. senators as well as your local congressman. It's just that easy. So not only I need you all to sign it, but I need you to share it. And everybody that goes to the page and does that and screenshots it and posts it in your stories, I will repost it. So please do that. Please tell people, talk to people, because awareness is critical. And this is something that this isn't just a Black women's health issue. This just isn't a women's health issue. This is going to take allyship from everybody to come together and get this. So men, we need you asking people, do you know about the maternal health crisis? This is what you can do to help. Women, even if you're not a minority, we need you going to your providers and asking them, were you aware that we lead the civilized world and women dying in childbirth? And were you aware that Black women are dying 5 times as often as white women? What are you in this practice that I'm supporting committed to doing to improving this, right? So we have to have allyship. We have to have committed. And then also make sure that if you are expecting, if you are looking forward to welcoming a new bundle of joy, make sure that you are informed, that you are prepared. Please tap into important resources like Dr. Clark's, the March of Dimes. There are, so many wonderful organizations that are sharing information about how you can come to pregnancy more informed, more empowered, because that's what it's about. It's about knowing, understanding the options that are available to you, and then knowing how to navigate these things. Because the reality of the situation is, with just some basic foundational information, you can increase your chances of avoiding one of these outcomes substantially.
Yeah. I'm going to let you go get your boys.
Thank you so much.
I do want to do a part 2 because I want to have a conversation with someone that, like yourself, on what people can do if they find themselves in a similar situation that you were in.
I would love that.
I think that would be a great conversation. But thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Say hi to your boys for all of us.
I sure will.
You guys
Absolutely,
have a
everybody.
wonderful week. Thank you. Thank you,
All right.
Charles.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye-bye.
Bye.